And you all should be.
And Judith, since you agreed to take notes, perhaps you could send it to David and we could send it to all the attendees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's the plan.
We might post them online.
Yep. And here's David with the agenda.
Actually, for everybody participating remotely, we're going to be working off of an agenda outline for the meeting, as well as a few other documents. They're available online. Paul, could you pull up the page with the documents on it?
Sure.
For everybody? Yeah.
See if I can share my screen here real quick.
And for all of you who want to look at these documents and are dialing in, it's igf-usa.org. And in the middle of the home page, there's a link to the documents page. Yeah. Scroll down a little there.
Okay, so here you're seeing the IGF-USA.org website. And David's done a good job of putting this together. And you see here's the meeting that we're having now, and then the kickoff documents here.
Yeah, click that open. Yeah.
So we've got meeting agenda, organization description, and draft timeline.
This is good.
So here is the meeting agenda.
This is very pertinent to the first thing we need to nail down. Yeah, please do.
There you go with the agenda, David.
Great. So Marilyn is passing out a timeline of many salient internet governance events over the next year, which is very relevant to our first order of business, which is to really think about when and where we're going to hold the IGF-USA. The two ideas that have thus far been floating around are sometime in late June and sometime in the fall. I'd like to put it open for discussion now. I'd like suggestions, thoughts on when we should have it. Yes.
If I could, thank you. I'll send David this by soft copy. It's Marilyn speaking. I'll send it to David by soft copy. But I'd like us also to think about how we fit into, our own event, and then also whether we can support additional relevant activities that are close to hand on the other events that are taking place. And so if we can think about when we hold the IGF-USA, and then also think about whether IGF-USA could support additional smaller events that advance our mission. And I just want to park that as a possible thought.
It's actually on our agenda. There's been so much talk about branching out the IGF-USA, so it's not just the Washington, D.C. IGF-USA, and having satellite or feeder events in other cities. San Francisco's been the one that's been mentioned most prominently, certainly New York, and Toronto once it thaws out. But I think we first want to, yeah, Boston too. And when they dig out Boston, we can, we can have it there. I think we first want to discuss and get an idea of when we want to hold the main IGF-USA conference. And then the second thing we should talk about is making some other city events come to life, a reality. So I'm going to open up discussion to when we should have it and where we might have it. Anyone want to?
So
I think right now we're all for Hawaii. Sorry.
We're not ICANN yet.
This is Robert. I'll just try to be short. I think there have been two kind of quick suggestions, which is June and early fall. Just in regards to June and the fall as well, June is the ICANN meeting as well. And so people that prep for that, I think it would either have to be, either before or after. It is in Buenos Aires, so there'll be some travel for people getting back. And in the fall, there is a lot of things going on in the fall as well. And so just finding a time to the larger point, which I think is an item that Marilyn and I think I've mentioned in the past, is definitely there's a nucleus of a lot of people that have been working on the IGF-USA, and that's why it's kind of been held in D.C. There's always been an expression that it would be great to coordinate and have some of the great expertise, but also the bringing together of the community take place in other parts of the U.S. and the North America region more generally. And I think it's great that there's so many people that are virtually on the call. I think this is the first time that I recall having such a, it does create some complexities, but I think it's worthwhile to do. What I think would be of interest is if there is a satellite event elsewhere. I think that's what's particularly key, is to find partners that could do that, whether it's a university, some other institution that is a partner that more or less like happened last year with Susan at GW. So identifying those, I think, would be particularly good. And going forward is just a story to tell. I mean, that being said, I think having something earlier would be good, because then we could go to the global IGF and have a story to tell of consultation, of meetings, best practices, and showcase that at the global IGF. And so then what's needed is a coordination amongst the activities in the US as well. And that's going to require some thought more than just doing an event. But I think those are kind of some quick ideas that I would be keen to see this year going forward. So I'll pass the mic.
Thank you. Robert, it's Marilyn. Let me build on that. If we do the IGF-USA relatively early, then we have the ability, if you're looking at the calendar that I handed out, I want to flag a really important timeline. And for those of you on the call, in June, the President of the United Nations will launch the 6-month preparatory process that will lead to a 2-day high-level event at the UNGA in December. The Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Committee of the IGF that Mike is on, Cheryl Miller's on, Aubrey Doria is on, and is taking consultation now, is calling for the 2 co-facilitators who are not yet announced and the President of the General Assembly to come to the IGF in Brazil. There's also an invitation out to the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, who is the Secretary General of the UN, has never attended an IGF, but Brazil has issued an invitation to him, and it is under advisement. I'm trying to think of entertainment, advisement, whatever the right UN word is, right? If we hold the IGF-USA in June, just thinking, that would position us to then hold potentially a follow-up smaller event, furthering our work and leading into the IGF itself. The second thing I just want to remind people is that prior to 2009, we did lead-up events. We didn't have a full IGF USA, but we did preparatory sessions. We could think about doing that in other cities. In the United States, it's much easier. You go to university, you have 3 hours, you go to the Tech Council in Silicon Valley, and you do a preparatory session, informing and bringing in a more informational approach. But we can only do that if we launch the IGF USA relatively early, and then we have messages to take forward. So that's just one idea.
Maybe we could consider flipping that order around, doing the leader events first and having a grand finale event, the conference in DC after all of those things. It seems good. It seems like it might be very powerful to lead up to a big IGF with theater events and lead up events and off conference events.
Just for all of the many great reasons that Marilyn and Robert already mentioned, I would also be inclined to think that an early June or mid-June event prior to the ICANN in Buenos Aires, prior to or concurrent with the kickoff in the for the WSIS review, would be the best time to have it. Also, we're by no means committed to any university, but I think it's worked well in the past to have it in a university setting, and getting that space available during the academic year would obviously pose more of a challenge, I think. But more for the where is less of an interest to me as far as the when, and I think the early to mid June would be the best.
A couple of notes real quick. We've had a request that people identify themselves before they speak, since not everyone has video. And also, I am working on getting a copy of this timeline visible on the screen for those who can see it. Okay, sorry. Good.
Yeah, Mike Nelson with Cloudflare in Georgetown. I just want to add on and second the idea of doing this earlier rather than later. I do like the idea of doing some side events as a lead-in, and I think we have time to do that. A good example is the Strata conferences, which O'Reilly runs on big data. They get a real drumbeat going because every week for the 6 weeks before the grand conference, they do a teleconference on the phone. You don't have to do necessarily something as fancy as we're doing here. Just get an hour or hour and a half with 3 or 4 people in different locations. You do maybe Austin, Boston, San Francisco, Canada. You could do like one a week for 6 weeks, and let's not miss Chicago. So that would be, I think, a way to just get the buzz going and highlight what we're going to do here in Washington. And I think, and one more thought, doing it earlier also helps us build momentum for the IGF Global, and it sort of brings out interesting topics, might help us identify additional speakers that we might want to bring to Brazil.
Hi, this is Kyle Renner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. So I would agree that earlier is better in terms of build up, and I would second Mike's comments just now, and in fact even his selection of cities in some sense. One of the things that we discussed last year was the possibility of having these smaller events. Susan mentioned earlier, GW would be happy to host again in the event that it's a DC-based national IGF. But I think I would be happy to also help try and coordinate those local events by reaching out to the relevant universities in those cities. So if we wanted to look at University of Texas Austin, University of Chicago, MIT, Stanford, I think that there's a set of universities with a strong interest similar to ours that because we are also a university, it would be a natural area for us to assist in the planning process. So as an aside.
Can I extend, further elaborate on that?
Yes, who is that?
This is Susan. Dimitri and I are officers of something called GigaNet, which is the Association of Scholars that work on internet issues. And so maybe what we could do, Dimitri, say what you think of this, is have some sort of linkage to other universities which might bring on student volunteers, but also have sort of locally coordinated events through that.
Okay, coming back to the room, I think Marilyn had something.
Can I, let me just. One thing it's Marilyn speaking, I'm just going to suggest, if we could pause for a minute and update everybody on what the main theme of the IGF is and what the sub-themes are, and take that into account, because there's also a call for intersessional work by the national and regional IGFs, and maybe we could just update on that and think about how we reflect on that in our thinking. I'm really glad Dima's on the phone as well. Dima, you've done a lot of work on leadership, on youth, but I want us to think about last year we had a little bit of a constraint in terms of our planning cycle and the number of rooms we had available. And so if we plan now, then we can take into account sort of what our needs are in terms of the number of workshops, the key issues, what's going on globally, what's going on nationally, and factor that into our thinking. So if I could just kick off, and you tell me when, David, we could just review quickly what the main theme is for the IGF and what the sub-themes are, and then we can take that into account as we brainstorm further.
Sure. Would anybody mind, though, if we kind of fleshed out when we want to have it? Because
Can I interrupt here for just 1 second? David Solonoff, New York, ISAC, New York. We would like to do it. Yeah. We would like.
but I'd like to ask Dimitri, Susan, and Kyle if there's any advantage to having it in the fall in terms of student participation as opposed to June.
So I think I brought it up last time we spoke. This is Dimitri Epstein. I mean, we can make an argument both ways. I think it will be easier actually to engage students if that's what we're looking for if we hold it in the fall. Because they're just gone during the summer, most of them. But I mean, if you take the students out of the equation, I think there are more reasons to have it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Okay, David Solonoff, ISAC, New York. I'd like to suggest that New York City be one of the satellite locations. We can certainly get major universities involved, and also could make some kind of outreach to the UN and local embassies.
And can I just also mention, we need to reach out to Jana, David?
Pardon me?
We need to reach out to Jana Anderson.
Sure.
Elon.
Can you put that in the note?
Yeah.
Great.
So this is Kyle Renner. To maybe add a comment on the aspect of student engagement, maybe one advantage of having the National IGF in DC in the summertime is the number of students who come to DC or who stay in DC for internships. So in some sense, maybe those highly motivated students who are interested in these issues might already be here or be in another location among the cities that were mentioned already. So yes, certainly there are clearly more students around, broadly speaking, during the academic year. But I think that given the sheer volume of internships in the Washington, D.C. community in the summertime for people interested in public policy issues, I think that there is still the potential for a strong number of interns to be in attendance.
Do that.
We're going to put it on the website now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think you took a picture. Yeah, but you need to,
Yeah, it'll be.
no, it says you can't share it.
Do you want us to put it up for this meeting or not?
Yeah, I do, but you just need to tell people that.
I'll make it.
Okay.
I'll-
So we're putting up the image of the timeline, but it's Marilyn's, and she would like for you not to share it, okay?
But I'll give you a shareable version.
Okay.
And we'll post the shareable one.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
So it's Marilyn. Thank you for posting this. I just want to make a comment about advancing the engagement of students. We have a really critical decisional point at the end of the year on the extension of the IGF. And as important as the engagement of students is, because we want to build the next generation, students are not going to get us the messages to key governments that we need.
Sorry.
to the
Oh my gosh.
So could we think about the network of students and student engagement as supporting what we're trying to achieve and build that network for the future? Because for IGF-USA, I think that's a critical component, but when we when we think about we've got to get the IGF extended, we need to be very strategic about how we engage on that. And so whenever we hold the IGF, I'm just asking us to think about whenever we hold the IGF-USA, to keep in mind we need to drive support to the extension of the IGF.
Hopefully
So
those,
this is Pepper, and I second Marilyn's point. We have to really focus on what we want the outcomes to be, what the purpose is, and I don't think at this point in time there can be any higher purpose, frankly, than the continuation of the IGF, the global IGF, and then going into the WSIS plus 10 process. The rest of it is nice, but as it may be a nice to do, but this is absolutely the critical must do. And if that doesn't get extended and we don't have the IGF in the future, we won't be talking about US IGFs.
I would think that getting students involved and energized about it might help in doing that.
In the long term, yes, but in the near term, dealing with other governments and other regional IGFs that are going to bring proposals that want to fundamentally change the IGF, I frankly, don't think in the near term. It may, because look, Dimitri, when he was a student, was actively involved and engaged and there. And if we can get students who are engaged to actually come to Brazil and be and participate, absolutely yes. And Dimitri can talk to this, and because he was helping organize the youth forums at the ITU and IGF and so on. But I think that that's how we need to think about student involvement as well, which is being strategic about it.
Hi, this is Robert Garrigan. I'm just getting a little worried because we have a lot of different kind of issues on the dock right now. Definitely the political issues that we're thinking of going forward that we want to try to address and try to advance are particularly key. But we have a short period of time, and we may want to think about tasking or creating different groups, because this is a planning meeting, and we're talking about strategy, we're talking about planning an IGF, and stuff like that. And so definitely, I remember past IGFs, there's always been a round that before we get into the planning IGF, there's been kind of an update on what are some of the global issues and what are some of the global IGF objectives that we want to try to achieve, and those have kind of come out. What hasn't come out, and so I think that's important, and that should be a key driver. But similarly, there, with so many people on board, I think breaking up into different groups, I think would be helpful. If we're talking about showing that there is a groundswell of activity in the U.S. and doing that early, energizing that, and I would say one of the, if I can do this, one of the criticisms is that at times the planning has been too centralized, and so an aspect, and we may not have a lot of time, is whether it's for the IGF in DC or elsewhere, but having the community being able to submit proposals. So there is a bit of a bottom-up process to that, I think would be particularly helpful. Issues in regards to bringing the global IGF and elsewhere, I think are very good and should be discussed, but again, there's only a set number of organizations, whether it's the government or the private sector or others, that should be, putting their heads together how that's possible. I think that's doable as well. And so we're just talking about a different thing. So maybe a map as the notes are being made in terms of all these different issues, and then having a discussion online or at a next meeting in terms of who wants to be involved, how they can participate, and what resources they can put on the table. The timeline is actually quite short, and so we really need to get working on these issues relatively quickly.
I just want to note that Ginger put in the chat, is it too late to have a theater event, for example, at the University of Illinois before June?
No. Well, depends on who wants to host it and whether we can get speakers. And I would say, look, so it's Maryland. So feeder events can be an hour, they can be 2 hours, they could be 3 hours. And as long as we have expert speakers or we provide materials. I don't think it's too short to do, 6 weeks from now, you could do an event at a university or at the Tech Council or at TechNet. If you've got materials and you've got a couple of speakers, why not? But I think you need to have a date for the IGF-USA, so you know what you're feeding into.
Yeah. So there seems to be a consensus that we should do it in June. Let me narrow down the question. Do we have a date range?
Avoid the IGF meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say the dates when not to do it.
Yeah. Let's narrow that down to dates when we should do it.
First 2 weeks.
First 2 weeks in June. We had talked about the original discussion for the second 2 weeks in June. Let's say that the group consensus is the first 2 weeks in June.
Chris, what did you say?
Doesn't have to be 2 weeks long.
I forgot I'm with a technical crowd and you have to be very literal. Let's have it one day that will occur within the first 2 weeks in June. Okay. I'm hoping this meeting won't take 2 weeks.
It would be all finished by then.
Yeah.
This is Jolly in New York. I'm looking at Marilyn's thing here, and I see the EcoSoc in New York in June. I see the launch of the General Assembly WSIS Review in June in New York, and it's seeming to me that we should think about New York and fitting in somehow very close to those events, like the day before or the day after, maybe.
No. Can I take the microphone? Actually, it's Marilyn. I think we should avoid those dates and then think about, because those dates are going to be very, very UN centric. If we do stuff, then after we do stuff, then we go in and maybe meet with the missions, friendly missions, and update them on what we're doing. The appointment of the co-facilitators is up in the air right now. It might take place before June. If it does, then we can go in and talk to the co-facilitators, but it might not take place until the middle of June. It's very unclear. I think if we just go ahead and plan our events, then we can be agile. And if we have our events scheduled and the co-facilitators are announced, we could invite them, one of them, to come to the event and update us. But I would take
Would still make sense to have the event, to have the IGF in New York, though, and that like?
No,
No.
not at all.
No.
So this is Robert Guerra. Just looking at the calendar and looking when the ICANN event, just from my perspective, the ICANN meeting is the week of the 22nd, but usually GNSO and other type meetings start a couple of days before. So my suggestion would be, if it fits, is the week of the 8th probably would be ideal. I don't know if that interferes and hands are going up, but I think it just, if we have a discussion very quickly now in terms of when dates in June, I think it would be particularly helpful. Mike Nelson's got a comment.
I think that works incredibly well. And it's not a huge conference, but on June the 9th, there's something called the Techonomy Conference. So Techonomy, which brings some pretty high-level visionary technical people to town. And we might be able to get some of them to come early if we did it on the 8th, which is a Monday. Mondays tend to be good in this town unless you're trying to get congressional participation. Mondays are good because not everybody's busy going to congressional hearings. There aren't receptions for 5 receptions every night on Monday night. So can I make a motion that Monday, June 8th be considered?
Yeah. Second.
I think it may
Unless it's
depend on.
someone's birthday.
Right. And
someone's birthday.
we might have to check with venues first as well. I mean, I think that that week is probably good. We might have to check with some schedules of some principals we might like to speak, and then obviously check with the availability of different settings. But I mean, I think the week general timeline's okay. I mean, I don't think we need to necessarily decide on the 8th today, but I can check with perhaps we've had Larry Strickland keynote in years past, and I'd like to check on his calendar. whomever else, I can only speak for my interest in having Larry speak. Yeah, but that's all. Okay.
Well, let's not do Friday.
Let's not do Friday. I think we can all agree on that as well.
So it's Marilyn. I will just say venue. So can we park that week? And if we don't get a venue that has, we need to have at least 3 simultaneous workshops, as well as a plenary that can, I think, probably 400 to 500 people in a plenary. I think we're going to have very high attention this year, and we may even want to have a parallel day before event on WSIS, rather than making it a part of, so we need to be flexible about that. But if we could ask Chris and maybe normally Ambassador Sepulveda has also spoken, or his equivalent, so maybe we could ask people to check that week as the priority. Mike, I don't know about this conference, but if you could send information about it.
It's gotten lots of CEOs, people like Mark Benioff.
Fantastic.
It's not a huge 17-session conference, but we might just be able to
Right.
off 1 or 2 keynotes.
And then we could, but I think we need to be thinking very strategically. This is going to be a very high-profile opportunity, and attendance of embassies here in Washington and others, and remote access from, if we're able to get theater events before and after, then that would really strengthen what we're doing.
That'd be great.
But it also means a lot of logistical coordination.
Okay.
This is Robert again, and just to follow up, I think, Mike's idea of bringing high-level CEOs is something that's mentioned before. I think that will also tie in terms of one of the biggest challenges that has taken place for this IGF and to others is also to get sponsorship, and so and getting good media. So a high-impact event that generates a buzz around that week, I think will be excellent, but we'll also have to raise the level of this group that's putting together the coordination and also the logistical partners. And so, like I said, it might be worthwhile as we move forward in the next week or two to figure out who are the logistical partners and who are members of a coordinating group that will work with the logistical partners to make sure people save the date and coordinate with other events. I think it's shaping to be good, but I think to get there requires some additional effort.
Great segue point. Thank you, Robert. The next thing we'd like to discuss is the organizational structure. It's basically going to be the same as last year, except for there'll be a working group separated from what was the administrative committee last year. And the administrative committee, what was last year, will largely be a steering committee.
I don't think a lot of people know what was last year.
Yeah, pardon me. Last year, sure, yeah. Last year, we kind of did it on the fly. The theme of today's meeting is 6 months is better than 6 weeks. Last year, there was an administrative group which had many advisors and many people who were kind of boots on the ground. There was also a steering committee, which is the open multi-stakeholder functional group, which is now the open multi-stakeholder group. And there was kind of the secretariat or whatever role ISOC DC plays as an organizational home just to anchor this, to kind of help its continuity. The only thing we want to change is the names, and we also would like to just create a functional space for a working group for the people that are actually doing all of the organizing and doing the day-to-day tasks. It's not set in stone, and we don't know who's going to be on those groups, and anybody can be on the working group if they're working on it every day. The meetings will all be open.
We know what this group is, though, right?
This is the open multi-stakeholder group. I think we might even have an acronym.
Oh, MSG.
Yeah, this is the OMSG going forward. Yeah. Yeah, no, this is the no, pardon me. This is the OMC. No, this is the OMC. Okay.
This is y'all company.
Okay. We're going to have a separate meeting to argue over what the acronym should be, and we'll have a vote, and we'll put up an online ballot. This is the open multi-stakeholder group, and it's open to anybody who's interested in participating. As the working group will be, anybody who steps up will be in the working group by nature of their stepping up.
Are we defining that today?
Yeah, it's one of the handouts. So, John, you want to say a little bit more about this? The organizational structure is one of the handouts.
So since I seem to spend time on organizations a lot, I think the idea is, the major idea is to have a group that really is doing the work to be able to work together, and people can come in and out of it, but it's the core group to it. The outside group is the one that really is open, and that's the one that's going to provide the multi-stakeholder impetus. And the steering committee is mainly because you need to have some folks that are on the higher level that can provide input and be able to organize. Right. And so the idea is both combination of openness and the final decision really going in the open, but then enough structure to keep things moving. And I think our discussion today about coordination, about multiple events is a good example of why you need a little more complicated structure than we had last year, which was as said, on the fly.
Paul, can I? Sorry, it's Marilyn. Thanks. It's Marilyn. I really appreciate seeing this organizational outline. If I could suggest that a 3-layer wedding cake is always better than a 4-layer wedding cake, just to think about this.
Depends how many guests you have.
It does, but let me say 2 things as a member of the MAG, and I'm sorry that I don't think Aubrey is on the phone, or maybe Cheryl's not on the phone. If you can avoid the use of the term MAG,
Yes.
please do so, Mike. Right? If you could call, let's not be the MAG, because people get confused about the MAG. No MAG. Something else.
Fewer syllables better.
You're in the MAG-free zone.
And secondly, actually, if we could collapse this to be 3 groups, just think about this as it's easier to explain it to the public at large. And if we can still achieve the functions that you're proposing, I think it would be helpful, because otherwise people are going, which group do I come to?
Well, the Secretariat's not a group.
The Secretariat's not a group. In fact, there are only 3 groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Secretariat is just an administrative home, which the bank account is.
Okay, then maybe what you should do in the Secretariat is you should also add in a couple of sentences about, this is where certain functions are provided. Right, and then
Actually, it could be kept out of it, and
No.
it's just a support.
No, John, I think it's excellent to have it here, but instead of it being 1, 2, 3, 4, which makes it, just move it down below and say these functions.
Put a number on it.
Right, and this is supported by the Secretariat and organizational home of the IGF-USA. Then it doesn't look quite so complicated. And then when you're explaining it to people and you hand out a fact sheet, it looks a lot simpler.
Well, one other thought I had, sort of following up on that, the multi-stakeholder steering committee in some ways may give the word steering on it may give more emphasis to what it's doing. That, as I said, it's really this multi-stakeholder committee, the larger body is going to be doing the working out. So its intention is to have a place where people that have a name, that bring in extra, have only a certain amount of time, they're part of the recognition. So maybe the changing of the word, because And I think
Yeah,
rightly, the words used make a difference.
We should take the word multi-stakeholder out of number 2, and it'll just be the steering committee. Yeah.
It doesn't add any value to say that on this.
Or you can put down below asterisk.
Yeah.
assumes.
We're all in favor of multi-stakeholderism in the room, right? Okay. But this is, I mean, we can certainly go into endless rabbit holes about the details.
Just to be clear, maybe
Just to be clear, it might be helpful not to call it the administrative working group, because it really is the logistics group, or just I'd just say logistics, and the other group, the steering committee, is coming up with a lot of the substance of the different sessions, and that's for me, that's the distinction. I mean, the logistics group is the one that's reaching out to sponsors, getting the rooms, putting all the pieces together, but the steering, well, you could call it the coordinating committee rather than the steering committee.
Well, I think you're right. If you make it the logistics coordination group or logistics working group, it's really
Just working
helpful.
group.
Yeah.
Or logistic.
Working group.
No.
No, it has to be more. It has to have an adjective.
You have to modify.
Just logistics group would work real well.
Yeah, because the point is, it's a narrow group. It has a defined function. People don't have to worry about it, and people aren't, right?
Yeah,
You don't have to be on it.
Right, and you don't have to be on it unless you're like picking up the bricks. I like that, Mike. That and it also demystifies it, David. Then it's John. Would you be okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I think these are all good. I'm a big believer that the wording should follow function.
yeah. The problem is in some agencies, the administrator is in charge of everything.
That's right.
Okay. So we'll change
So we'll,
administrative to
we'll
logistics.
circulate around for any further.
So this is Robert, maybe a suggestion. So there's logistics and administration. I think conceptually the way I'm seeing this is maybe this is not the way you want to formulate it. The way I see number 2, which is the steering committee, that's really kind of the strategic advisory group. Now we may want to call it, but it looks like we're just taking IGF speak and putting it in here. But I think, in terms of, and when we went around and everyone did introductions, I mean, I think Pepper and a few others, I think, mentioned some of the key objectives that we want to try to achieve. I mean, definitely a group of folks that really know what the key issues are and driving us, whether conceptually, again, I'm calling it the advisory group, we may want to call it a name, that are basically thinking of, the key issues going forward, and make sure that we put those people together. And so that may be a way to do it. And then the other one, which is really the day-to-day, is more kind of a program committee and a conference type of approach. And so, I think conceptually what we call it and what we call it on paper may be 2 different things, but I think, well, the program committee, I think, is the last one here, which is basically the ones that, folks that come together, but ones that keep us on task to make sure that the high level objectives are met. We definitely want to make sure that those people coalesce together, work together, and coordinate with the rest. And so kind of that's the way I'm seeing it. Again, call it what you want, but I think we need to start populating these groups as soon as possible.
Yeah, sure. I like that. Steering committee, logistics committee.
Okay.
Multi-stakeholder.
In the past, though, in previous years, in the first few years, it was my understanding that the open committee was called the multi-stakeholder committee of some sort.
Actually, it was called the steering group, and everybody was welcome to it. It was like 40, 50
Okay.
people.
Okay, well, then that's the same thing.
Let's not multi-stakeholder everything, let's just buying it down everywhere else.
I think this Glenn would like to.
What they did was come up with a
The
program.
program. It was
Hold
all-
on, we have a voice from the Great North.
Yes, thanks, David. It's hard to interrupt, but I really like what Robert was saying. Robert was really bang on. We need to identify which committees. I'm a very task-oriented person, so let me know where I can hang my hat, what tasks need to be done. So if I can have not only the timeline, but also what are the core responsibilities of each of the working groups, I'm there. So you can count on me, but I need to know which aspect I fit in.
We sure will. All right. So we've hammered out the names of the groups, and we will start populating them as soon as possible.
And we have a
And whoever's ice fishing, whoever's ice fishing in the remote, could you please turn off your mic?
Susan, do you mind muting? Thank you.
Susan, did you want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess not. The next thing that we kind of wanted to read, and this is just a draft, but we have a draft timeline of tasks till a June event. And the timeline was written, let me give you a little background. There's been 2 preliminary get the ball rolling calls that have led to this meeting. First, the June date was kicked around, and the last call, everybody seemed to prefer a fall date. The draft timeline was written with a June date in mind, which is good because we can keep it now. I don't have to change it again. But there's a draft timeline that's available online that's on the screen now that everybody has. I don't know that we need to discuss this now, but there's a lot of the things that were brought up in this room. I would like to make this a Google Doc that everybody can comment on. And as things start emerging and taking shape, we're going to be updating this, but it's good just to keep our eye on the prize and have a few benchmarks set up today.
David, it's Marilyn. So given, I think you have agreement to a kind of a structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could we think about looking at this and putting it into that structural approach? Like under March through April, these functions would go to different groups, right? And so I'm just gonna give an example. So this is the I'm reading from the overarching theme and sub-themes for the IGF. Under flesh out subjects, we might want to, if we're going to do consultation very broadly with the community, then we would want to post the theme and the sub-themes, and think about which group that would come back to.
Sure.
Then when you put this out as a Google Doc, you would have keep the topics, but have like who's responsible.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I can. Me and you can take the first pass on that. That would be helpful, actually.
Yeah. Somebody apparently doesn't like my suggestion.
One of the things, what I want to bring to attention is one of the things we did last year that worked was for each specific task or panel or function like social media or promotion or organizing rooms, we made up work teams from the various committees to put together certain panels. So there was somebody from the steering committee and somebody from the admin committee appointed to run panels. I kind of want to repeat that. That's one of the things that worked last year. So when we predicate the timeline upon the organizational structure, I'd like to bear that in mind.
Question?
Question?
Dan, did you have a comment?
Well, I unfortunately need to step out here soon, but just wanted to, this idea of the linkage with feeding into the overall IGF, I think is critical. So,
Sure.
The more that we can do in terms of identifying what those themes and sub-themes are and getting the voice of our national IGF on that platform and kind of bring it together, I think is critically important. So I would absolutely be in favor of helping to serve on that and do work there.
We've kind of gotten all the administrative things that we needed to talk about that are specific to the IGF-USA out of the table, and the rest of the meeting, the open discussion, should be dedicated to those issues. Dan?
This is Robert. Just a question. I was looking at the draft timeline. I think something that I don't see, maybe it's assumed and maybe it's being discussed, is, and also going to Mike's point in regards to having high-level VIPs come to the event, is the title, the name. It's just IGF-USA, but usually there's a title associated with that. And I think having that first would be key, because then that is what's part of the promotion. That's part of the engagement going out to sponsors and donors and the such. So I think that's something that whether we want to try to do that by the end of this month or early March, I think that is a very key objective that needs to be agreed to. We can work on the program later, but without a catchy title and a very short description, that's the hook that will get the interest.
Wasn't it called IGF-USA last year?
Yeah. Marilyn, what's the history of titles on IGF-USA?
The history, the theme has been that we tied it to the IGF, and pretty much we tied it to the IGF. We pretty much tried to reflect something that was consistent with the IGF. So the IGF title this year is Evolution of Internet Governance, Empowering Sustainable Development. And if we did IGF-USA, Evolution of Internet Governance, and we put that out for comment.
I like Evolution of Internet Governance, how not to screw it up.
Mike is always so provocative.
I'd like to start with IGF-USA 2015.
That's a good start. I didn't hear a second on
Mike is very good with titles, so I'll be.
No. Mike is very good but provocative.
And we want that.
Yes.
Maybe not as.
Let's move on to the themes and the open discussion part, where we talk. Let's discuss feeding into the main IGF and what we need to do to accomplish that.
Can I ask a quick question first? So what we're looking at.
Mike.
That must have been noisy.
Before we go on to the open discussion, can I just ask quickly what we were looking at in terms of the website and content development?
That's on the
That's yeah.
That's something I didn't want to discuss today, but we need a committee. We need to define roles and define the content we want and define what type of updates. I think we need to flush out the subjects of the event first, and everything now is just preparatory. And
because we have it as a February goal.
So we need
it's still February.
Not for long.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the first working group will be the web working group. Stephanie, you've just volunteered. Thank you. Natalie, are you there? Natalie Green, are you still with us?
Yeah.
I'm volunteering you for the web working group also.
Okay, sounds good.
And Jolly? And anyone else want to volunteer before I volunteer you?
That was Stephanie Deschanel.
Yeah.
I was speaking earlier.
Anyone else want to volunteer for the website working group? Okay. There you have it. We'll be in touch.
There will be others.
Yes, there will be others. Can we get back to the themes of the global IGF? Marilyn, would you like to? Yeah, please.
So, thanks. So the thoughts, look, we have 8 sub-themes. What we've done in the past is kind of ask our community what they're most interested in. And we have cybersecurity and trust. This is the IGF, already agreed to, right? Cybersecurity and trust, internet economy, inclusiveness and diversity, openness, enhancing multi-stakeholder cooperation, internet and human rights, critical internet resources, and emerging issues. Let me decode CIR. CIR is where we've always parked the IANA and ICANN issues, but gone beyond that because we've worked now since 2006 to make sure that CIR was not only about ICANN, it was also about the critical internet resources, internet exchange points, internet connectivity, secure, the kind of like DNS issues. Maybe we could think about posting these sub-themes and asking our group, 8 is a lot, right? But some of these, I think it's easier to, I'll give it to you in just a minute, Judith. Some of these I think we could possibly merge and think about, because what's not on here, the enhancing multi-stakeholder cooperation, if we are going to contribute to ensuring the extension of the IGF, then enhancing multi-stakeholder cooperation may be a key activity. What are the examples? What are we doing to broaden diversity? How do we show that the Internet Governance Forum has made a difference, not just domestically, but globally? What we've kind of done in